Let's jump right into this explainer. I want you to picture a warm spring day, 66 million years ago. The Earth is lush, it's green, and it's just teeming with life. We're talking a climate way warmer than today, barely any polar ice caps, and early flowering plants are spreading everywhere. In this vibrant world, you've got massive predators like T-Rex and huge herbivores like Triceratops just roaming the forests. Pterosaurs with 10-meter wingspans are owning the skies, and giant mosasaurs rule these warm, shallow seas. It was a world that completely belonged to the dinosaurs, an absolute epoch of biological success. But high above, completely invisible to those giants down below, everything was about to change.
Think about the sheer contrast here. Dinosaurs ruled this planet for over 165 million years. They survived different epochs, they adapted to shifting continents, and they dominated literally every ecological niche you can think of. They were the ultimate survival machines. And yet, it took just one single day, a terrifying 24-hour window, to wipe their entire world away. Geologically speaking, an empire that lasted for millions of years was violently dismantled in the blink of an eye. Which kind of forces us to ask, right? What could possibly possess enough power to end an entire era so incredibly fast?
Well, to understand the scale of this catastrophe, we really have to look at the killer itself. Deep in space, a mountain-sized asteroid, we're talking roughly 10 to 15 kilometers across, was dislodged from its quiet orbit between Mars and Jupiter. It was likely Jupiter's massive gravitational pull that gave it that fatal little nudge, sending it hurtling toward Earth at a mind-bending 20 kilometers per second. To put that into perspective, that is dozens of times faster than a speeding bullet. At that insane velocity, a rock the size of Mount Everest crossed those final millions of kilometers in just a few short years, zeroing right in on a shallow sea in what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. So, let's track this terrifying sequence minute by minute, because it unfolds with absolutely devastating precision. At T-minus seconds, any dinosaur looking up would have seen a flash brighter than 1,000 suns as the asteroid hit the atmosphere. At the exact moment of impact, the rock was moving so incredibly fast that the air couldn't even get out of its way. It compressed and superheated into plasma hotter than the surface of the sun. Minutes later, the impact gouged out the Chicxulub crater, 180 kilometers wide and tens of kilometers deep. And within hours, a horrific thermal wave blasted across the globe, bringing with it mega tsunamis hundreds of meters high that just rushed inland across the continents.
Honestly, it's hard for our human brains to truly comprehend this kind of scale. But we're talking about an impact energy roughly several billion times greater than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Billion! When this asteroid struck, it didn't just break apart, it instantly vaporized, taking a massive chunk of the Earth's crust right along with it. This violently blasted billions of tons of molten rock, dust, and toxic gases straight up into the atmosphere. Some of that debris flew so high it actually briefly entered space before raining back down. And down on the ground, seismic shockwaves triggered massive earthquakes and volcanic eruptions all over the world. The impact literally shook the entire planet to its core.
Now, those initial firestorms were absolute hell, for sure. But the true extinction mechanism was a devastating global environmental collapse. It was a classic domino effect. All those billions of tons of soot and pulverized rock up in the atmosphere totally blocked out the sun, plunging the Earth into this freezing artificial night that lasted for months, maybe even years. And without sunlight, photosynthesis just came to a grinding halt. The plants died. Without plants, the giant herbivorous dinosaurs rapidly starved. And once the herbivores were gone, the apex carnivores weren't far behind. The entire complex food web, built over millions and millions of years, just collapsed like a house of cards.
So the crucial takeaway here is that this impact winter resulted in the death of roughly 75% of all species on Earth. Every single non-avian dinosaur, the flying pterosaurs, the giant marine reptiles, all of them just erased. But you know, here's a truly shocking fact. This wasn't actually the deadliest extinction in our planet's history. Nope. About 200 million years before the dinosaurs, the Permian-Triassic extinction wiped out roughly 96% of marine life and 70% of terrestrial life. But what makes the dinosaur extinction so uniquely fascinating is the sheer speed of it all. It wasn't a slow fade. It was a sudden, violent reset button smashed by a cosmic hammer.
Of course, science is always evolving, and we should definitely look at a slightly more nuanced timeline that's heavily debated. There's this well-known theory surrounding the Deccan Traps. Basically, in what is now modern-day India, Massive, continent-scarring volcanic eruptions had been spewing toxic gases and ash into the atmosphere for hundreds of thousands of years before the asteroid even hit. Some researchers argue this prolonged volcanic activity was already severely weakening life on Earth, causing massive, extreme climate stress. So, in this view, the dinosaurs were already really struggling, and the asteroid was just the final, fatal blow to an ecosystem that was already collapsing.
But how do we actually know an asteroid was the main culprit? I mean, for decades, scientists blamed diseases or mammals eating dinosaur eggs, or just a natural decline. The real turning point in solving this massive mystery was the discovery of the iridium layer. Back in 1980, a father and son team, Luis and Walter Alvarez, were studying clay samples at the geological boundary marking the extinction, and they found massive concentrations of iridium. Now, iridium is incredibly rare on Earth, but it is highly abundant in asteroids. Soon after, scientists found this exact same iridium layer at the extinction boundary all over the globe. It was the ultimate smoking gun, giving us definitive proof of a massive cosmic strike.
And if you want to know exactly what happened on the ground that day, we can actually look at a 66-million-year-old time machine. It's a site called Tanis in North Dakota. Even though it's thousands of kilometers away from the impact zone in Mexico, Tanis gives us a perfectly preserved window right into the past. When that asteroid struck, the seismic shock waves were so insanely powerful, they caused an inland tsunami, a massive sage wave in a North American river system. This violent wave rapidly buried an entire river ecosystem alive under thick sediment, perfectly preserving the very first hour of the catastrophe for us to dig up millions of years later.
The evidence they pulled from Tanis is absolutely breathtaking. We've got fish that were violently buried alive. But the most mind-blowing detail? Glass spherules, also known as tektites. Remember how the asteroid blasted molten rock into space that cooled into tiny glass beads and rained back down? Well, paleontologists actually found these glass spherules lodged directly inside the fossilized gills of the fish at Tanis. These fish were literally inhaling the debris of the impact just moments before the wave buried them. Plus, microscopic analysis of the bone growth rings in these fish proved they died during the spring. Talk about bad timing? That is the worst possible season for an extinction, right when animals are reproducing and at their most vulnerable.
And it's here that the irony of evolution becomes crystal clear. Think about it. Being a giant, powerful dinosaur was the ultimate advantage for 165 million years. But on this specific day, it was a fatal liability. You simply couldn't hide from the heat, and you needed way too much food to survive the long, dark winter. Meanwhile, early mammals were these tiny, mouse-sized creatures. Their small size was suddenly a superpower. It meant they could hide out in underground burrows, completely sheltered from the initial firestorm. And because they were essentially scavengers, they could survive on seeds, insects, and decaying matter long after all the fresh vegetation was wiped out.
But it wasn't just our tiny mammalian ancestors who made it through. Right alongside them, a very specific cast of highly adaptable, seemingly mundane creatures managed to scrape by too. Birds, which by the way are technically avian dinosaurs, survived. Crocodiles, turtles, snakes, various fish and insects also weathered the storm. What did they all have in common? Adaptability. Ectothermic reptiles like crocodiles can go months without a major meal. Birds could just fly away to find new habitats. It really proves that when the world turns entirely upside down, brute strength means absolutely nothing. Flexibility and low resource needs? Those are the ultimate survival tools.
The beautiful irony of all this is the profound ripple effect this single day had on our own existence. I mean, if this catastrophic event had never happened, those giant terrestrial dinosaurs would likely have just continued their reign. Mammals would have been kept in check, forced to remain tiny, nocturnal, underground dwellers, just hiding from massive predators. This extinction literally cleared the ecological path. With the massive predators gone, those surviving mammals ventured out, they grew larger, and they diversified into countless new forms that eventually led to primates and ultimately to us. In a very real way, we owe our very existence to the worst day in Earth's history.
But there is a crucial difference between us and the dinosaurs. Unlike them, we can look up, and we actually understand the cosmos. We're now actively mapping the skies for dangerous near-Earth objects. We don't just have to watch helplessly. We're building actual planetary defenses. Just recently, space agencies successfully tested deflecting an asteroid by crashing a probe right into it. That was the DART mission. It proved that we have the technology to alter a celestial body's orbit. We are quite literally the first species in the history of the planet capable of protecting our own future from the very threat that wiped out our predecessors. How cool is that?
So I want to leave you with this final thought. Life is incredibly fragile. It's fully capable of being erased by a random rock out of the void in a matter of hours. Yet, at the exact same time, life is brilliantly resilient. It adapts, it hides, and it endures through absolute devastation only to bloom once again. The next time you look outside, just remember that every sparrow, pigeon, or eagle you see today is a living, breathing dinosaur. They're the descendants of the ultimate survivors who looked the end of the world in the face and flew right through it. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Stay curious and always keep looking up.